Okay, so Dr. Anil Abraham, welcome to this nice informal discussion. And the whole principle of this discussion is to find out a little bit more about you, Anil. That's number one. Number two, you're an extremely successful dermatologist. You run your own center. You're a professor, dermatology. You're Stanford educated. I mean, I'm just looking through some of the details of yours, and I find it amazing. But more so, I also find it amazing that you've got such a nice eclectic mix. You're an actor, you're a stand-up comedian. I mean, I've seen some of your mimicry and all that. It's just fantastic. So, how does one reach all this? I mean, you seem to be successful everywhere. So, Anil, just in your own words, would you like to share with us who is Anil Abraham, the doctor, the actor, the stand-up comedian, the philanthropist? I mean, you do so many things. Would you like to just share in your own words?
I think to get a real picture of what a person is, you must ask his wife or spouse or partner, because she might have a completely different story to tell you, which is not all adulatory, which is good. I think the significant other, the person you spend a lot of time with, including your family and kids, tend to keep you very grounded because they will definitely let you know when you're going wrong. So that the posh kind of introduction that we get when we go in for a conference or when you're invited as a speaker somewhere, and the kind of reactions you get when you come home sometimes when you've tripped up really badly, those are the two things which help you to balance situations out in life. So very often I remember a very pithy piece of advice that my wife gives me. She says, if you zip your mouth, you would solve a lot of problems in life because, I eat too much. I'm a foodie. So I love to eat. And then the weight gain is a problem for all of us. So that is one thing you can solve by keeping your mouth closed. And the second is, you tend to give extempore kind of spontaneous reactions to everything that's going on in life. Especially once you've hit your 50s, you feel vaguely like you are a know-it-all. You've kind of done everything. I've been in this situation before. And a lot of times when people come to you with their problems, they're not coming for advice. They're just coming for a listening ear. So
Right.
sometimes if you spend a lot of time listening to people rather than talking or offering them something that you have to say, and that includes a parenting technique also. I think a lot of times kids just come to share their problems with you. They don't want you to solve your problems for their problems for them. So yes, I've done a lot of exciting things. And when you've reached this stage of life, Ian, sometimes it sounds like a cliche when the younger generation says YOLO, you only live once. And I think that's not a cliche. It should be a kind of a guiding principle for us in life, because there is no second chance that I'm going to get later where I say I'm going to do the theater part of it sometime later, or I'm going, if I want to go see some wonderful place in India or abroad, I'm going to save up for it and go when I'm 60 or 70. There are lots of things that you sometimes postpone for too late. So I think you have to run life on parallel tracks. And if you say that a large part of an Indian childhood, especially around 10th standard or 12th standard, and lots of students are going in for these important years now, parents often tell you, beta ye 2 saal pad lo, fir uske baad, everything is going to be okay. 10th standard you get good marks, ICSE you get good marks. And I had Malayali parents, so the accent was slightly different. It was, Moine, this is second PUC padichu medicine kitya. If you get the medicine, your entrance exam and all your life problems will be solved. And I went along that track for a bit till I realized that the track was not in the direction of the destination that I wanted to go. Yes, that was a good train that I had caught, but I also wanted to see a lot of places along the way. So the comedy, the stand-up, the improv comedy, theater, all of those things, I was not going to get another chance or another life to live. So I had to do all of those things and reach here carrying all those emotional or whatever else baggage with me. So I think it's important that you realize that you're not going to get second, third, and fourth chances, and live the life that you're given in the one life that you have.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. So, Anil, that's really awesome amount of information. But when did you pick up this? Because, this seems to be what we figure out later in life, that you only live once. Otherwise, it's a cliche. When the
Yes.
reality hits us. So when did that hit you? And just for our listeners, how old are you now, Anil? Because you said when I reach 60, so I'm thinking you're
57.
still
57.
57. So you still have 3 years more to reach that 60 mark. And it's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The golden cutoff. No, we set ourselves so many, like a lot of youngsters think that life is over at 30. So when you're creeping up to 60, I feel it's just starting. No, a lot of us realize that there's a lot of freedom in life in 50s and 60s, which we didn't have when we were younger.
You're right.
Yes, we had a wonderful body. We had a lot more energy and youth, but there is nothing that is keeping us from retaining that energy and youth when we are older. And so I find that this is a very liberating time of life. When you're reaching 57 and 60 is actually the time that you can, build on all the things that you've done in life. And so it's a great age. I don't find anything restrictive about being 57 or 60.
Brilliant.
When I realized, to answer your question, I told you it was around 10th or 12th, but I don't think the children in those years, and I'm talking about 70s and 80s, 1979, 1980, when they were not the children who had much choice, in the sense that you were given very few life choices, and you kind of were a good kid and followed instructions. But somewhere along the way, I realized that yes, I am enjoying the process of becoming a doctor, but I'm not going to make sure that that is restrictive. And I often quote Robin Williams when I say that, where he has this beautiful quotation from the movie Dead Poets Society, which says, medicine, business, law, these are all things that we need to live. But romance, poetry, drama, theater, these are the things that that make life worth living. And so I think somewhere, in my early teens and in my 20s, I realized that the parallel tracks are going to have to happen. Otherwise, I'm going to miss out on life, on all that life has to offer.
Brilliant. You put that so well. Anil, one of the questions that I had in my mind, you're Stanford educated and you were top of the class and gold medalist right through. I mean, how did you reach there? What was your thinking? Or did somebody push you into that? And, just if you can give us a snippet of understanding of how does an Ivy League college education help in today's world?
I was from a middle class family. We didn't have a want for basic needs, but we didn't have plenty. We had, I am very amused when I find people buying an entire bar of chocolate and biting into it. We never had that. We bought a Cadbury's chocolate, and you got a little square piece of chocolate. That's what you got, and that was rationed out. It wasn't given to you as a whole. So I'm not going to give my kids start laughing when I talk about relative poverty. But, I'm not going to give you that rags to riches story, but it was a lower middle class family. And I don't think there were many options or alternatives. You just had to struggle and make sure that you were special and that you got noticed. And so, if you struggled I studied in St. Joseph's Boys High School and in St. Joseph's College of PUC. So there was no alternative. If you were hoping to get into a good professional course, you had to struggle and do it yourself. There was no easy method where somebody was going to pay for you or get you a capitation fee or something like that. So there was just no option. You had to struggle and do it yourself.
Right.
And with parents who were not from the same field, my mother was a professor of botany in Mount Carmel College, and my father was in government service. So there was nobody to lead me along the way in medicine and tell me, how things are going to go. So I had to do that, search for universities, find out where I could get an admission, search for, the All India entrance and, try and get into PGI or All India Institute. Those kind of things were happening. I mean, the struggle had to happen. I'm not trying to cushion that at all. Mrs. Gandhi had an emergency slogan, which seems so inappropriate now, where Mrs. Gandhi had an emergency slogan which said, "There is no substitute for hard work." And I had cut that slogan out and stuck it on my notice board in front of me, because there is no substitute for hard work. I don't think there is any, I don't even believe in, innate brilliance that somebody is going to get it because he's just so brilliant that he's going to get it. Every single person around me who I've seen is succeeding has worked really hard to get there. It hasn't happened by chance. And like they always say, luck happens to people who work really hard.
Yeah.
After when I was doing my MD, I had written a paper on psoriasis, and this was published in an international journal, which was noticed by a professor in Stanford. And he asked me whether I'd like to do research with him, which is how I got there. And then subsequently, I got a chance to do research with him on the field of psoriasis and genetics. and continued with my studies in the US. I always knew I was coming back to India. Um, a sense of pride in my nation was always there, and I knew I was headed towards in the direction of coming back to India and to serve here. So you asked, how did the experience help you? The chance to be in a good university was very, very liberating because it opened up my mind and got me to see the kind of lives people were leading over there. And I'm not talking about luxury lives. Very often when I would go in for a Friday lecture or a Saturday lecture, and which was in a common auditorium, I would find that the person sitting next to me, who was an elderly gentleman looking very refined and having a chat with me, and would say, I would say, isn't that really fascinating what he's speaking about? Or we had a cup of coffee in the break, and someone would later walk up to me and say, do you know who you were speaking to? And I said, I had no idea. And he would be a Nobel laureate. Wow. So studying in a place, in a university like that, it made me extremely humble, because I found that the higher levels to which people had risen in their lives, they were very normal and accessible, which is something which I sometimes find lacking in us. That is, here, the minute you climb a couple of platforms or you've reached a certain level, you become so inaccessible and so far removed from reality that nobody who's climbing the same steps can reach out to you and ask for help. The spirit of mentorship, the spirit of taking care of a junior and trying to see that he also rises to that level, that was something that I found wonderful, and I wish we could bring it into all the teaching and training that we do over here.
But you're also, been recognized as one of the best professors, and you get called out for that so often. Give us some idea about how do you do that? And on one hand, you're a successful dermatologist. You could have actually forgotten about teaching and all that, and you could have actually just focused on making money and becoming. Anyway, you're considered one of the best dermatologists that we have. So, give us an idea of how did you make this balance between teaching and doing work?
I completely enjoy teaching. And sometimes people ask me the question of how do you manage the dichotomy between being a doctor, between being a teacher, a professor in a medical college, and being, like say a theater performer or a comedian. I find the common thread in all these is communication. And I think that's true of any profession that we take up nowadays. If you're not an effective communicator, you can't. Half the problem that the patient faces with dealing with his doctor is that the disease is not explained. Nobody is trying to simply tell you what the problem is and how to sort it out, what you need to change in your lifestyle. No one's communicating that effectively. And I think half the solution to for a patient is when a doctor talks to him nicely. Right. The same, you might have a lot of knowledge in your mind. You might be a really brilliant person. But if you can't cater to the lowest common denominator in the class, the student who's having difficulty in learning, if you can't read and digest your most complicated theory and present it to them in a simple manner that everyone in the class can understand, then you haven't done your job as a teacher. And the same is true for theater. Whether it's using words or whether it's using your body or whether it's using your facial expressions, even if you're sitting at the side of a scene and you're a relatively unimportant performer in a given scene, your reactions to what is going on the stage is so important. So the common thread is communication. And I think if you are an effective communicator, it doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, a professor, or a theater performer. Effective communication in whichever field you are is basically, I think, the key to success.
Wow. So this coming from a doctor and a successful one of that, see, we talk about bedside manner, chairside manner. And, sometimes those are also looked at as only cliches. Somebody says, if you're good at your work, you don't need all this communication. But I'm of the other opinion, like what you just said. So can you give us one or two tips on being a better communicator from Anil?
I had a professor of community medicine who once told me that there are some delicate topics, some of the things that we find delicate to discuss in Indian society today. For example, if you're explaining the menstrual cycle to a young girl who doesn't understand in a rural area, and he was a professor of community medicine, he talked about how he went out and he would explain to the young girls in the village in a school education program and talk about this princess who lived in a little kingdom within your body. And every month she would come out and princes would come to meet her. And if they had a Swayamvara and if it worked out and the princes were happy and the marriage was going to take place between the princess and the princess, then there was a celebration and something, the whole palace would be decked up. But if that kind of interaction between the princess didn't work out, then all the decorations in the palace were taken and thrown out. This sounds silly to an urban girl who understands every part of her body. But when you're explaining the menstrual cycle in something simple like that, even when I'm explaining disease, sometimes I'm talking about something called urticaria, which is an allergy. And the person is so focused on getting better immediately and not finding out the cause. So the cause could be you have a stomach upset, you have a GI infection, or you have worms, and you're not treating that. You're just treating the red bumps on your skin and trying to take an antihistamine and become better. And when I'm speaking to a patient, sometimes I give them an example and I said, if you have a leaky tap at home and you keep picking up a cloth and wiping the floor, it's not going to solve the problem. You will get an immediate dry floor, but you have to call the plumber in, or if you know how to do it, you're going to have to open up the tap and change the washer. You have to treat the primary cause. If you haven't treated the primary cause, your problem is going to be a chronic problem. And you can see that little light bulb go on when you use simple language, when you use language which is connected to their normal day-to-day life, and explain a medical problem instead of saying, you know, it's to do with the T lymphocyte and the B cell immunity overcomes the T cell immunity and there's a cytokine storm. There's so much of these words being used even with corona, and nobody has an idea of what is going on. What is a cytokine storm? What is going on in the body? So when you explain in a language that is a common person's language, you'll find that communication gets far more effective. And I find the ones who fail at communication sometimes are the ones who are so filled with their own jargon and their own language of science or their language of their profession that they fail to convert that into a language that the person you're talking to can understand.
Awesome. So would you say that, see, coming from your Stanford background, again, I'm tapping into that. Because did you pick up some of these tips there that, you speak simple, short words, simple sentences, rather than, try to, be bombastic and, sort of come top down at people. It's so nice to communicate with somebody who can make you understand. So
I do that all the time. In fact, one of the first things that Professor Faber, who I dealt with in Stanford, when I went into his room, I'll tack it to a little amusing incident, is that the first time I was going across to the US and I'd carried 2 big bags, and never please ever do this. I had all my shirts in one bag and all my pants in the other suitcase, and one suitcase didn't land up. So I was in a really horrible pair of jeans, and the rest of me was dressed formally with a tie. So he looked me up and down. He was also, some people in parts of America haven't met an Indian in those days. So he looked me up and down and thought, oh my God, what have I brought here? So, and then he started speaking to me. And one of the first things he said to me was, but you speak good English. So sometimes it surprises people that you speak a language at all. And then the first seminar that he called me to give on psoriasis, which was a complicated topic on the etiology and the understanding of the immunology of psoriasis. And he said that after the seminar was over, he called me to his office and he said, that was a very good seminar, but you don't have to speak so fast. You can speak a little slower, you can make the sentences shorter, because I don't think anyone in the room understood a word that you said. I think it's our convent school education where, somebody who speaks glib and speaks fast is considered a good speaker. Whereas there, a lot of times it is when you enunciate words carefully and you're able to use much simpler language. In fact, the Tarurisms, which are considered so very posh here, if I used a word like floxy, noxy, nihilipilification or whatever, I would be considered really weird. I mean, why is he saying that when he could just say something as completely irrelevant or use a very simple term for the same thing? So the Americans have simplified, and the Englishmen would say that they've oversimplified everything. But there it is important that you communicate, like you said so correctly. It's important that you use less complicated words, you use simpler phrases, and you say what you're trying to say very lucidly and clearly.
Awesome. So I'm so glad this is coming from you, Anil, because, as a doctor who has to explain things, in fact, sometimes maybe serious, medical conditions to a patient. And if you bring it down to their understanding level, I think you're really getting through to the heart of the matter. Okay, Anil, I want to go to this aspect of work-life balance. You seem to have figured out some sort of formula somewhere. Would you like to share with us how did you arrive at a formula for work-life balance, if there is one, or do you just go day to day and see what happens?
Luckily, a lot of things that I otherwise like to do can be done outside what is considered, traditional work hours. And after I've opted to, stop my teaching career at St. John's, which was a couple of years ago, then I find that, this commute to Koramangala and the commute back, which would take me 3 hours, has decreased a lot. So I'm able to be the master of my own time to some extent. A lot of what I do with improv comedy, with stand-up comedy, and with theater happens after 7:30 or 8 in the evening, which is the time you usually come back and get into comfortable clothes, into pajamas or a lungi, and switch on Netflix or Amazon. When you switch on, or if you opt for the Indian serials, one of those Saas Bahu serials, and settle down with with your family to watch a TV serial, is the time that I end up doing the other things that I like to do. I like writing also. And it would seem to me that in my home, everyone has that kind of thing happening where we're all together, but we're also doing our own thing at the same time. If you can manage that kind of a balance where, your time which you're spending on your profession is very exclusively for that, because I don't think any patient is going to appreciate me saying, wait one minute, Mr. Ramanujam, while I'm checking your skin, I will also be recording a comedy video for myself. You can't mix work life in that manner. You have to, when a person is sitting in front of you and has come to you for a medical problem, you have to be completely and exclusively there at that, fully focused on what is in front of you. And at the same time, I should not be thinking it's getting late for, I have to hurry somewhere else. So this hurrying from one thing to another, I think dissipates the energy for all those things that you do. You have to just make the time. You have to kind of find those parallel tracks and run those parallel tracks. Because if you're trying to mix everything up, you fail badly. And if you decide that because you can't mix everything up, you're not going to do all, you're going to do only one, then you end up, feeling like you've missed out on a lot of life. When I got married, one of the things that I asked my wife was, do you think I do too much? Do you think I should cut down on theater? Because those are the late night things that usually people do. And she said, as a spouse, I want to tell you something, that if you give up theater, you give up something else that you love, because you married me, or because you think you need to focus more on the marriage than on that, then you're going to hold that in your heart always as a, subterranean resentment against that person is, I gave up this because of you. So even though you're trying to be fair and you're trying to, involve me and say, I need to spend more time with you, at some stage, 20 or 30 years into the marriage, you're going to hold that resentment against that person and say, I gave up this very important part of my life because of you. So don't do that. Do all the things that you love to do. I'll do all the things that I love to do. And then we'll have a common point where we meet and continue with our lives. So this freedom that we give each other as, partners in life, I think is very important. And I would give a lot of credit to what people are seeing as my work-life balance, to the way my family allows me to have a work-life balance.
Wow. And did you pick up some of this in childhood, or was this, later life, understanding of way things?
I work-life balance, I think, was very clear much earlier in life, because even though I chose medicine as a profession, when it came to choosing my super specialty, and since I had done, in terms of marks, I had done well, I could have chosen a specialty which, if like I was headed towards pediatrics, I really loved that, and I had the marks to choose pediatrics and do something like that. But during my internship, I found that when I was doing pediatrics, I enjoyed being with children and I dealt with children well. But that didn't translate into, wanting to deal with sick children all your life. And the fact that if you take up something like pediatrics, there is no off time. Because at any given time, I would expect that I should be available for a parent who has a sick child. And so any given time, they should be able to get me on the phone, and I would be able to, should be able to deal with that. The same with cardiac or cardiothoracic, those specialties which have emergencies, and have a lot of very sick people. So I very specifically chose a subject like dermatology, which said, yes, there is a problem. I'm going to help people. I'm going to deal with situations like psoriasis and leprosy and infective diseases and fungus and hair loss and people not looking good or they burnt themselves. But I am going to also have a little time where at the end of the day at 7 o'clock, I have to be able to switch from Dr. Anil Abraham to the regular Anil that, also wants to live in this one life that he has.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I love the depth and the credibility that you bring to this discussion. Really super. Anil, thank you so much for that. I have one question on, how important are looks? Now, for instance, I was thinking, I'm seeing some bald patches and all that. Then, at my age, I'm thinking, like, who cares, man? It's really not important. I mean, what you bring to the table is what's inside here, not what's outside here. But as a dermat and, a person you're all the time dealing with looks and self-esteem. Can you share something about that? How important is good skin and good looks and all that to the psyche?
Honestly, it's as important as you make it, because I find all kinds of people, I meet all kinds of people professionally and even otherwise. Since I'm seeing people in theater, since I'm seeing people in advertising, and I'm seeing people professionally as patients, I would like to say don't dismiss anything that they bring to the table. A lot of times when I'm dealing with doctors, they tend to think of dermatology as a very superficial, why are you dealing with people's vanity and stuff like that. I've had young people in their 20s and early 30s whose entire focus on the mind, instead of being on the IAS preparation that they're doing or the interview that they're going for tomorrow. For example, if I were to ask anyone who was in a meeting like this, what is the last thing that you did before you sat down and said, okay, record? It would probably be to check whether your hair is okay. Right. So even though we would like to dismiss looks, we unfortunately or fortunately, our social passport is what we present in the way we look. So when a person comes, and I tell my students this when I teach them in a medical college, they tend to dismiss somebody who's just come in and said, doctor, I'm very worried because I'm losing hair. And when I had a bath yesterday, I found a whole tuft of hair in my hand. Or when I'm combing my hair, I find that I'm looking more and more like my dad and he's gone completely bald. Now, that sounds silly. It sounds very superficial. It sounds like, he's focusing a lot on vanity, whether it's a man or a woman, or even children nowadays come in with those problems. But I'm saying don't dismiss it, because he has brought his problem to you. And it's not right on our part to say, this is a very superficial thing. If you have a liver problem, it's important. If you have a kidney problem, it's important. If there's a hole in your heart, it's important. But really, your hair loss is not important. Who has given us the position or godly position of deciding for ourselves that what he is bringing to the table is not important? It's important for him. He's come to you because he has a problem and he wants that solved. That is one. Am I saying telling everyone to go out and be obsessed with their looks? Yes, it's happening now in an era where everyone's taking selfies, everyone's on Instagram, and they have filters to modify their looks. So everyone is very look obsessed. So I'm not promoting a culture which is look obsessed, but I'm saying if someone has come to you with a problem and he wants you to solve it, then take his problem as seriously as you would a liver or heart problem, because the huge difference between dermatology and other specialties is that you or I could have cirrhosis of the liver, but nobody else is going to know. You or I could have renal failure and be going for dialysis every third or fourth day. Nobody else is going to know. But if you have a zit on the tip of your nose and you're going in for an interview, that day, everyone from the lift operator to the person interviewing you is going to say, Anil, what's happened? You've got something red on the top of your nose. So that is definitely visible. It's visible disease. It's visible problems which everyone else can see. And every single person out there is going to comment on your problem and make it a part of their disease. Every auntie, Subbalakshmi auntie next door is going to say, beta, if you put some turmeric paste on your nose, it's going to become okay. Everyone's offering solutions. They're not offering solutions for cirrhosis of the liver or a hole in the heart. They don't know that you have a problem. Right. So when it's a visible problem, the amount of seriousness that the world and society gives it is reflected on the seriousness that you give it. So yes, problems in dermatology, trichology, your hair are important because it's important to the patient. And he is the prime. We have to be patient-centric in whatever we do, whatever specialty we practice. The patient has to and continues to be the most important person in the discussion.
Super. I wish more doctors could hear you and start to follow your philosophy. is really so important. Patient goes there, looking up to the doctor as, the next person to God. And some of the doctors say, don't bother about this, or don't tell me that. And, I don't have time for this nonsense. And, doctors sometimes treat us very badly. But I'm so glad there's somebody like you who listens, who's so sensitive. I have one question on the aspect of the changing world now, with COVID. Lifestyles have changed.
Yes.
Not knowing what to expect has changed. Anil, you being a good, well-educated person, knowing the human psyche, also seeing how this is affecting other people, do you have some advice for the new world order? What could we do different from here as citizens, as leaders, anything? Wide open field for you.
You've answered part of the question yourself when you started the question, where you said things are changing. I think an important lesson we've all learned from this entire episode, and I hope it's going to be an episode and not the constant in our lives, is that change is inevitable, and the only ones who succeed are the ones who learn to accept change. I love the serenity prayer, the one that is up on the wall in my clinic, which says, Lord, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think we repeat this prayer every day when we get up in the morning, whether it's COVID or whether it's other crisis situations that we face in our lives. We will learn to have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. You cannot change. You cannot make the lockdown disappear. You cannot make the virus disappear overnight. You have to have the courage to change the things you can, which is a sense of hygiene, a sense of social distancing, not spitting on the road. All these are things which we should have been doing for a long, long time. If you look at our grandmothers, when we entered the house, they would say, "Kai kal tulkon ba," wash your hand and face and come to eat something. Now, all those have disappeared from our lives. Maybe it's one way of bringing those back. And so the lockdown lessons we learn are to accept change, to accept Corona or COVID or whatever else that life has to offer, and to understand and value the really small things in life, because we get to realize through crises like this that the things that we take for granted may not always be there. And so the smaller things in life, which we took very casually, we learn to value those things much more, learn to accept change, and learn to value small things are the two lessons I've learned from the lockdown, and I hope we can all learn that together. And whatever life has to offer, we are able to tackle those if we remember the simple message of the serenity prayer, which is used in the Alcoholics Anonymous.
That's a brilliant prayer. Actually, so all of us can do well by just understanding it and using it, like you said, as a prayer every day. Awesome. So the biggest lesson that Anil has learned in life?
Not to take myself too seriously.
Wow. Why did you learn that lesson, and how did you learn that lesson?
Like I told you about the Stanford story about the Nobel laureate sitting next to me. Even though he's won a Nobel Prize a few years ago, he doesn't take himself too seriously. He has no problem having a conversation with an ordinary undergraduate student who's sitting next to him. And I feel that we take ourselves too seriously. You just look at any of the WhatsApp groups that you're on, even your family WhatsApp group, your school classmates, your college classmates, friends you've made in the neighborhood. We are getting angry, upset, and there's so much of angry discussion going on based on religion, based on some small thing that has happened, an incident. Every single thing is making us so upset because I think we take ourselves too seriously. The smallest little comment which says, Anil is a dermatologist. Is he seriously a doctor also? That kind of thing. And you're trying to convince everybody that, a dermatologist is like a damn good doctor. I don't have to convince anyone. I lead my life. I'm doing a good job of whatever that I have in front of me. And it's not my job to convince my entire school group that my subspecialty or my super specialty is the most important one in the world. It's not my job to do that. I don't take myself that seriously. Or I post a comedy video and someone doesn't find it really funny and he says, "You're mocking people with that accent." I can only think, I'm celebrating an accent. If I do a Malayali accent and I'm a Malayali myself, I will not mock anybody by doing that accent. I'm celebrating it. Like you enjoy appam and stew and koshis, And that's not mocking Kerala cuisine. You're enjoying Kerala cuisine. Relishing every bit of that upperman stew in your mouth. So this is a method of me celebrating something from my culture, something that I've noticed, whether it's a Kannadiga accent or an Anglo-Indian, way of life. I think we need to celebrate all those things, and every little thing shouldn't tick us off. There are things which we should really get angry about. When people are disrespecting women or are being really mean to a street animal, those kind of things, yes, then put your foot down and say, this is absolutely wrong, I'm not having it, but not about yourself. Someone has insulted me, someone has treated me really badly. I think we take the wrong things very seriously. So I think the life lesson that I've learned is not to take myself too seriously and to learn to laugh at myself and all the other seemingly huge problems that we face in life. I think if we can laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously, we have it made in life.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And again, this is another super lesson from you, Anil, and thank you for that. Looking forward, looking ahead, what next for Anil Abraham?
What next for me? I am hoping that, one of the things that really worries me is even if you've established yourself, you find that in this present world, you have to re-establish yourself many, many times. So I was in radio and I did a comic character called Uncle Apukutan, which was very popular at that time. And then there's this entire generation, including my own kids, who will come around and say, seriously, you did something on radio? I've never heard of it. Nobody knows about you. So the entire generation is like, looks, as soon as you post something, they will check on YouTube how many subscribers you have, how many people have, liked, how many comments are there. So you have to keep reinventing yourself. And it looks, the American term is hustle, I think. You have to keep telling yourself all the time, which is something one generation or two generations away we didn't have to do. You just had to be good at whatever you were doing. And it was not important for you to market and sell yourself in such an aggressive manner. So that is an interesting thing when I look at the future, because it's not something I've trained for. I've not trained for this in my entire life. I have, people from my generation who've been in the field, and you all know, well, probably know what I'm talking about. I have a classmate called Harish Bijur, who's in brand marketing, who's also wonderful at this. So I'm looking with fascination at people like y'all and saying, how much more there is to learn. There is no end. In fact, I think I think one of the things that we all learn towards this stage of life is that the more you learn, the more there is to learn. So there is absolutely no end to this. So, trying to recreate yourself or regenerate yourself for a different generation, for a different age group, is what I look forward to in the future. I'm not going to go down that path of, you're increasing the likes or, selling yourself in a aggressive manner. I watch that with amusement, and I hope I don't ever fall into that rut. But I watch it with amusement and say, oh my God, this is the world that they are going to have to deal with. So imagine what they will have to do to make themselves relevant. All we have to do is do our job well. They have a lot more to do other than doing their job well. They have to make sure that they're visible and they're constantly liked. And it just takes very little for somebody who's been on the top of that entire spectrum to suddenly drop and lose a whole lot of followers. So it's a precipitous world, like they say, your ups and downs in life are very much reflected in the number of likes and followers that they have. So the future involves not only being good at what you're doing, but it also involves a lot of, being visible and selling yourself, which unfortunately is going to become a part of life.
Awesome. Just looking at the present situation and how, like, I've reinvented myself, Anil. Now we are doing most of our sessions online.
Yes.
I'm even doing coaching online. I'm doing training online, webinars and other things. Does some of that happen to you, or have you thought about it? Because, a lot of people are not going to want to come into a clinic anymore, especially with things like skin and all. So they might want just, an consultation online where they could, show you their hand or their skin or whatever it is, on a camera like this, and you could prescribe. Do you see something like that happening, or do you think, no, it has to be, I have to see them upfront?
Nothing is going to replace. In fact, we've had a webinar, we've had a discussion in dermatology among the doctors about how robotics or that, that kind of thing where somebody just types in their symptoms and gets a reply or a medication. Could that be something of the future where there's artificial intelligence replacing the human being? I'm hoping that medicine is one of those fields where the human interaction is going to continue to be important for some period of time. Right now, we're not reaching out and touching people, but otherwise, the warmth of somebody, I don't know if you had a family physician where you went to and you went feeling really miserable, bad cold, headache and fever, and just the fact that he talked to you nicely would make you feel better even before you left his office. So I'm hoping the human interaction is not going to be replaced. But that said, a lot of what you are saying is already happening. And I mentioned Harish Bijur earlier. One of the things that he said was about being hungry and reaching out to your customers. He was talking to business people. So I made a list of all the patients who were coming regularly to the clinic. We sent out a video to them which said, the clinic is safe. We are measuring your fever with the forehead thermometer. We are sanitizing. There's social distancing. Everything is being maintained. And it was a month or so after the serious lockdown had started. And after I sent that video out, I suddenly found people reaching out and saying, "Can I come into the clinic now? I didn't even know you were open. This is good to know." So that little bit of giving people information, and some of them who reached out said, could I, manage the consultation with a video call? Could I have an online consultation where I send you photographs? So what you're talking about has become a large part of my day now. A lot of it is online consultation. And very, very fortunately for me, dermatology is a subject which is visual. So a lot of times your rash or the hair loss or a patch of fungal infection can be easily photographed. And now everybody is wonderful at photographing themselves and things on their skin. So the skill that a person has with their phone cameras and the kind of smartphones that we have now is standing in good stead in fields like dermatology. So send in their pictures. Sometimes it's patients who can't come because they moved away to Delhi or Chennai or got stuck over there. They're abroad. They went to visit their son's or daughter's pregnancy. They've gone across to the US and couldn't come back for follow-up. And they have a really bad case of, an allergy which they were following up with you. So the online consultation has become a part of life. And yes, I think, dermatology and telemedicine is going to be a large part of our future.
Excellent. Anil, I have one last question before we close. Does what's within us affect what the skin is? So can the skin be used as an indicator to figure out what's happening or what's going wrong?
I told you I was headed towards pediatrics and internal medicine. So the wonderful part of taking dermatology is I think that a lot of times the misconception of dermatology is as a subject dealing with just the skin and hair, which is absolutely wrong. The skin is a mirror of what's going on inside your body. And when you use words like sallow and dull and I'm not looking good, what has happened to you, you're looking tired, that kind of people are actually looking at you and reflecting on the way that you live your life, the amount of exercise that you're getting, the kind of food that you eat. There's the old statement which says, you are what you eat. A lot of what you put into your body reflects in your skin and hair. And a lot of times, and it's common knowledge, I mean, you don't even have to be a medical person to know that if you're anemic, you look pale, if you're jaundiced, you look yellowish in color, and so on. There's a lot about the skin that reflects internal health. There's an entire specialty which is dermatology and internal medicine that is, being able to diagnose. A lot of times in St. John's, when we had hundreds of patients coming in, very often I would find, just a quick cursory glance at a patient, and I would refer to medicine and say, please check the patient's sugars, and I think he will need treatment for diabetes. And the younger doctors in medicine would be like, how is this dermatologist sitting over there and telling me to check for sugars? But I would have seen that he has a typical fungal infection in the groin or on the genitals, which is classical of an early diabetes. And I'm able to, pick up diabetes for the first time and pick up internal disease for the first time. Sometimes they have very subtle skin signs or hair or nail sign. And I'm able to look at the nails and say, this person is likely to be anemic. This person is likely to have this problem, which is preventing an absorption of a certain mineral in the body and so on. So a lot of times it's like a divine intervention. You're provided an entire mirror of what is going on within the body on the surface of the skin. So the skin is not a superficial disease. The skin is not a superficial specialty. If you carefully examine the skin, you're able to pick up a lot of things that are going on within the person.
Right. It is a diagnostic tool, and I think a lot of us should understand that. So skin tells us a lot of what's happening inside. To finally wrap up this whole session, Anil, first of all, let me thank you for taking this at short notice. But you're such an amazing guy to talk to, and there's such a wealth of knowledge. I think we need to have one or two more sessions on other topics also. But one question, since you're so enigmatic and you've got these different areas and facets for yourself, what is the legacy matter for the great Dr. Anil Abraham?
That's a really difficult question. We have a resident welfare association in the area that I live in Vasant Nagar, and recently, maybe for the last 4 or 5 years, I've involved myself a lot more in the resident welfare since I left my teaching job at St. John's. I'm able to involve myself in the nitty-gritties of the stuff that is necessary for their area and go out with that team of volunteers. And it's really funny, where I thought I was doing well in life and I was successful. We're talking about success and leadership. I thought I was successful. And there are people I meet in that group who I grew up in the same area. I was a child in the same area. I haven't moved other than for my studies and back in the same part of Bangalore. And I find people that I meet during this interaction who say, I knew you were a doctor. I knew you were somebody really important and doing well in life, but I didn't know you were a nice person. I didn't get to talk to you. I didn't get to chat with you. And I feel that's sad if you've lived 50 odd years and people felt that you were too inaccessible and too distant and maybe too intellectual, and God, he must be so proud or arrogant. I have no idea how he's going to be. Can we actually talk to him? That kind of thing, if you're able to break a barrier and reach out to, to normal people and everyone around you and get them to see the real you, I think that is the legacy. The legacy of being a decent, kind person is all that you need to leave behind. I don't think professional achievement in terms of being very clever or coming first in class or, being a multidimensional person and having talent in theater really matters if people don't remember you 50 years down the line as, hey, he was a really nice man. No, it's so sad something happened to him. Or now I feel that, if in the setting of Corona, if I put out a message in that group and say, I think I'm having fever, I need help, I'm going to get 100 people running in to help me now than might have been 20 years ago when I was supposedly successful at whatever else I was doing and leading what others outside would see as a successful life. I think reaching out and touching hearts is so much more important than any other success that we get in life.
Simple legacy statement. I love that. So thanks very much, Anil. I learned a lot from you today. And from the whole gamut of who's Anil Abraham to understanding the simplicity of a legacy message and saying, finally, it's all about being loved. It's all about being recognized for who you are inside rather than what you do on the outside. I thought, wow, this was a nice experience. And I thank you for the same. Thanks very much, Anil. And I look forward to more conversations with you on some other topics at some other time.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed speaking to you.
Same here. And you're a real pleasure to talk to. Thank you so much.